How to install the Elita US-700 Undersink. Your Elita US-700 includes a single spout faucet, a T-valve or angle stop adapter to connect to your cold water line, a digital flow meter and LED display ring to keep track of your water usage and your filter life, and the Elita US-700 Undersink housing and filter. Step 1 in installing your Elita US-700 is to decide on a place for your faucet. You may want to use an existing hole, such as for a soap dispenser, or you may need to cut a 1.5-inch hole at the sink or countertop where you want your faucet installed. For the ease of this demonstration, we will be showing the entire installation above the counter. Once your hole is ready for your faucet, before installing the faucet, you first will need to install the LED display ring onto the bottom of the faucet. Do this by passing the threaded mounting shaft of the faucet through the hole in the display ring. Next step is to pass the cable from the display ring through the hole that you have made for the faucet. Pass the cable through the hole and then pass this threaded mounting shaft through the hole, making sure not to pinch the cable. Once the faucet is sitting at the counter in the mounting hole, from under the counter you will need to install the cable spacer. This spacer will be installed on the bottom of the mounting shaft with the convex side facing upward. Make sure not to pinch the mounting cable in the spacer. Next, install the locating ring or washer onto the shaft. This locating ring should be installed with the raised side facing upward. Pass the mounting shaft through the hole in the locating washer. Next, install the star washer onto the mounting shaft. And lastly, install the lock nut onto the shaft. Tighten the lock nut to secure the faucet to the counter. The next step in the process is to install the angle stop adapter or T-valve into the cold water line. Make sure to turn off your source water when installing the T-valve and leave the source water turned off until the installation is complete. The next step is to install the filter into the Elita housing. To do this, you may want to use the filter wrench that came with your Elita US-700. Use the filter wrench to loosen the canister on the housing. Then unscrew the housing from the lid. The filter for the Elita US-700 is bi-directional, so there is no top or bottom. Place the filter into the housing, making sure that it is centered. Then, place the housing lid back on the housing and tighten it. After hand tightening, make sure to use the filter wrench to tighten the housing all the way. It is important that the housing be tight so that there will be no leaking once the water pressure is on. The next step is to decide on a place to mount your undersink housing. The housing ships out with the mounting bracket attached. This bracket can be used to mount the housing onto the wall of the cabinet below the counter. If you prefer to stand the Elita on the floor of your cabinet, simply remove the bracket by removing the 4 screws on the top. This will allow you to turn your housing over and set it on the lid for more stability. The next step is to install the tubing from the cold water T-valve to your Elita housing. Measure the length of tubing you will need and cut the tubing. We're using a special device to cut the tubing, but we recommend using a sharp knife to cut your tubing, making sure to make a clean, straight cut on the end of the tubing. Then insert the tubing into the quick connect fitting on the T-valve, pressing it all the way into the fitting to make sure that it's fully inserted. Give a little tug so that it makes sure it's secured in the fitting. In case you need to disconnect the tubing, you will push on the collet or ring that is right at the opening of the fitting while pulling on the tubing. So push on the collet while pulling the tubing out. Connect the other end of the tubing to the fitting on the Elita housing marked in. Do this in the same way that you connected the tubing to the T-valve. The next step is to find a place to mount the Digiflow meter under the counter. Before mounting the meter, it might be a good idea to install the batteries and make sure that it's working. To do this, first plug in the cable from the LED display ring on the faucet to the cable on the Digiflow box. The cable connector is keyed, so it will only be able to be connected one way. First install the batteries in the Digiflow meter, remove the door from the top of the meter for the battery compartment, install 2 AAA batteries into the Digiflow meter. When you install the batteries, you will hear a long audible sound, and then the LED on the LED display ring will flash several times. Once you have installed the batteries, make sure to replace the battery door. Then decide on a location for the Digiflow box under your counter. You will mount it using the Velcro tape included with the Elita US-700. The next step is to connect the Elita US-700 housing to the Digiflow meter. You will need to measure a piece of tubing that will reach from the housing to the meter and cut the tubing to the proper length. Once you have the proper length of tubing, connect one end of the tubing into the fitting on top of the Elita housing marked out. Connect the other end of the tubing into the fitting on the Digiflow box. The next step is to connect the other end of the DigiFlow box to the faucet. Cut another piece of tubing to the appropriate length, then install one end of the tubing into the fitting on the DigiFlow box. The other end of the tubing will be attached to the threaded mounting shaft of the faucet. To do this, first install the tubing insert into the end of the tubing. Simply slide this fitting into the tubing. Next, install the compression nut onto the tubing, making sure to pass the tubing through the smaller hole first. One side has a larger opening. You're going to use the smaller opening. Pass the tubing through the small opening. Next, install the plastic ferrule onto the tubing. This will fall down into the compression nut. Insert the end of the tubing into the threaded mounting shaft. Slide the compression nut up to the shaft and tighten the nut all the way. This will secure the tubing to the faucet. Your final step is to flush the filter in the Elita US-700 and test the system. To do this, turn on your source water and make sure that the valve on your angle stop adapter is turned to the on position. This is the on position. This would be the off position, turning the water off from going into the tubing. Then turn on your faucet. Give it a few seconds and water should begin flowing out of the faucet. Allow the water to flow and flush the filter for 1 to 2 minutes until the water runs clear. Check the system for leaks at all the connections. Once your water is running clear, your installation is complete. Enjoy your water. How to change the filter in your Elita US-700 Undersink and how to reset the filter counter. For the purpose of this demonstration, we will be showing all the components above the counter. This is your Elita US-700 housing, which is normally located under the counter, along with the DigiFlow flow meter box. This would be your T-valve connecting into your cold water line under the counter, and your faucet at the countertop with the LED display ring. When the LED on the display ring changes to yellow, it indicates there is 30% or less of the filter life left. This is a good time to order a new filter, as it will soon be time to replace it. When the LED on the display ring turns to red and an audible sound is heard, it indicates the filter life has expired and it is time to replace the filter. To replace your filter, first, start by turning off the water supply to your Elita US-700. Do this by closing the valve on the angle stop adapter located at your cold water line. When the valve is in this position, it allows the water to flow through the tube. To turn the water supply off, turn the valve to this position. Next, before opening the canister, you will need to relieve the pressure in the system. Do this by turning the faucet on as if you were going to get a glass of water. You may get a small amount, a few drops of water out of the faucet, or you may get no water out of the faucet. That's okay. Our purpose is just to relieve the pressure in the system. After doing that, you can use your filter wrench to open the canister. Make sure to have a towel handy, as the canister will be full of water. Slide the wrench onto the canister. Use the wrench to loosen the canister. At that point, you can unscrew the canister the rest of the way by hand. Remove the old filter and set it aside until you have gotten your new filter completely installed and properly working. Take the new filter. Remember, the filter is bidirectional, so there is not a top or a bottom. Place the filter into the canister, making sure that it is centered. Then replace the lid on the canister and tighten the canister first by hand. Then use your filter wrench to tighten the canister the rest of the way. Make sure the canister is closed tightly to avoid any leaks. You can now turn your cold water supply back on so that we can flush the new filter. Open the valve on the cold water T-valve adapter. Make sure to turn your faucet on. Wait a few seconds. Water should start flowing out of the faucet. Allow the water to flow for 1 to 2 minutes in order to flush the new filter, or until the water runs clear. During this time, check the system for any leaks. Once the water is running clear, you can turn the faucet back off. Now it's time to reset your filter counter. To reset your DigiFlow filter counter, with the water flow off, press and hold the filter reset button located on the front of the DigiFlow box for 3 to 5 seconds. Once the filter counter has reset, you will hear an audible sound, and then the LED on the LED display ring will flash several times. This completes the process of replacing your filter and resetting your filter counter. Enjoy your water.